But this is not a black and white issue. This is a very, very nuanced issue, and nobody knows the depth of it.
Tuesday, June 9th, 2020, episode 11, season 2 of Barney and Clyde, a highly popular podcast delivered fortnightly and forthrightly. And we'll tell you more about that in a minute. We have 3 segments today on the fine line between caring and grandstanding. We're going to look at Democrats getting on their knees for social justice. They really said that segment. We're going to look at some fun stuff people have said on Twitter this week. Andrew Yang, S.E. Cup, the very stable genius, that would be Donald Trump, the Gushers Corporation, or the Gushers brand of, I don't know, some kind of a squirty type treat or something, and a girl crying about an email she got from the Trump campaign. In the state and the individual in a time of civil unrest, we're going to look at the Minneapolis City Council's vote to disband its police department. And are there ways in which that might be good for minorities? So welcome, everybody.
Yeah, welcome back to the Digital Libation Station. You're back with Barney and Clyde. And for those of you who are longtime listeners and viewers, this is going to sound like old news, but Barney is a conservative and I'm a libertarian, and we meet fortnightly and forthrightly and talk about the weighty matters of the day from a conservative and from a libertarian perspective. So if you want to know more about our Venn diagram overlap and where we diverge, then you can feel free to go back and peruse our previous catalog, and there will be all kinds of fun stuff for you to discover back there. So what are you drinking today, Barney, since we always have some kind of refreshing beverage at the Digital Libation Station?
I am, maybe you've done this one, because kombucha, blueberry ginger. It's a, I guess you call it I don't know, it's a drink. And it contains 3% juice.
Kind of like the United States, but
yeah. Kombucha, blueberry ginger, and live probiotics. I guess it's going to be good for my gut. And so
you need something.
Exactly, yeah. In these times, you need something that's good for your gut.
I'm using the Zoom digital background, so it kind of messes up the thing. You can't really see see it. But I'm having this. I'll put a link in it. But I'm having this By Bubbles antioxidant infused sparkling water, and we had the blood orange version once before, and I'm having the blackberry lime version today because I'm mod for it, just mod for it.
Well, okay.
Let's dive right in.
Okay. This first one, this is kind of interesting. The fine line between caring and grandstanding. You know, you and I, when we were starting into the show prep a few days ago, we discussed the fact that it's been a pretty raw time for this country, and there's certain things you gotta be careful how you handle. You want to handle them responsibly.
Yes.
And I have been writing about this. I all you long-timers, BNC long-timers, know I have both a blog and a Substack newsletter. My blog's called Late in the Day, and my Substack newsletter is called Precipice. And I'm writing nearly daily at one or the other or both about various aspects of this.
Yeah, you've kicked up some dust a couple times.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I all kinds of layers of consideration come up. There's the matter of, you can't deny that there is a Black American subculture within American culture. I mean, it shows up in cuisine and modes of dress and mannerisms, but most especially music. And I love Black American music. I teach jazz history and blues history and an overall course on the history of African American music at our local community college. And I play jazz, blues, and soul professionally. I'm a guitarist.
So you're a cultural appropriator.
Yeah. But I think Duke Ellington and um, Miles Davis and are some have made contributions to American culture that are of the highest order. And before I start sounding like I'm patronizing, and I wrote a book. I wrote and published a novel some years ago called High Sea at the Sunset Terrace, which is set in it's set in Indianapolis in 1948, prior to the Civil Rights Movement. So most blacks lived in one section of Indianapolis, anchored by Indiana Avenue, which was where a bunch of America's greatest jazz musicians came from. And so the long and short of it is, I'm aware of that. The other side of the coin is blacks are Americans, and it seems to me ought to be first. But how do you untangle that? I don't know that we can ever get to where race is not. I don't know what it would take to where race was not a matter first and foremost on the nation's plate.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with it after, hundreds of years of slavery, and then about 90 years of Jim Crow, and then what we've had for about the last 50 plus years after that, since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And of course, George Floyd's death was horrible and unjust as can be. It's right there on video. And for my money, I'm no lawyer or prosecutor, but I think there would be a case to be made that Chauvin ought to be charged with first-degree murder. But all right.
My understanding is that the first degree means that it was intentional and premeditated. And I'm not a lawyer either, but just from what I've heard some other pundits saying that throwing first degree at this guy would be a recipe for disaster, because he's never going to get first degree, because it's not premeditated, because they were caught on tape actually talking about how to keep the guy alive. They did a piss poor job of it, obviously, but they were talking about it. So the fact that it was unintentional, though completely and horribly negligent and brutal overuse of force, they never get murder one to stick. So the best that from my understanding, is the best they could do would be second. And the masses don't seem to agree, but the masses don't seem to know the law either. And again, that's not my specialty, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Now, and there's layer upon layer of all this, but one thing that this whole situation points up is that every darn aspect of it needs to be out there, put on the table. George Floyd had a violent criminal history. At one point, he'd been the ringleader of a home invasion, and that involved him putting a gun to a pregnant woman's abdomen. He served some time for that. He had a long-standing drug problem, and he was on some hard drugs the day he died. That's one of the things I've been taken to task for. Why is that important, Barney? And so there's that.
It's a good point.
There's also,
why is that important?
It just.
Because if you think about it, if the guy had just knocked over a convenience store or something, and let's say, for example, he shot the clerk and killed the clerk. Right?
Yeah.
And the police show up, and he puts his gun down, he puts his hands up, and he says, "I'm not going to resist." I mean, the procedure says you take the guy to jail. He's not resisting. Even if he's guilty as hell and has got a rap sheet a mile long, he doesn't deserve justice on the scene.
But we'll never know if he knew that $20 bill was counterfeit. That knowledge went to his grave with him.
Yeah, it doesn't matter though. Like he could have defrauded millions of dollars, and if he surrenders peacefully, he needs to be taken into custody peacefully.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what level of resistance he put up, but
did the drugs he was on, fentanyl and methamphetamine, have any physiological effect on him as the breath was going out of him in those last few minutes? I don't know. My point is that it's important for us to know, because there's a temptation to make him a hero. As a matter of fact, one of the artists who created the mural that they showed at his memorial service said, our intention was to make him a hero. Now, we're getting a little closer to the subject at hand. Of course, there were the first few days there were both peaceful protests and riots. The riots seem to have subsided some now, but there's peaceful protests just going on. As a matter of fact, they're all around the world. Amsterdam and Rome and London, all kinds of places are having protest rallies about George Floyd's death. And now, okay, one more thing. An organization that's playing a big part in the response to George Floyd's death is Black Lives Matter. As a matter of fact, Mitt Romney was seen marching down the street in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of people chanting Black Lives Matter. Okay, Black Lives Matter. The phrase sounds like something anybody ought to get behind, but it's not just a loose aggregation of people. It's a formal organization that was started in the middle of the last decade by 3 Black community organizers: Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi. And they were they met through an organization called Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity that trains community organizers. And from the get-go, it was intersectional. It was steeped in identity politics of all sorts. They were into giving space to the gender non-conforming and the trans community and all this stuff, which it was from the get-go a identity politics. And you look over their platforms on their website, and it's a separatist organization. They will enlist alliances from whites to some degree, but they make it clear that it's a Black organization, and there's absolutely no talk about grace or healing or redemption in any of it. It's all about retribution and strident separatism and so forth. And
I'm going to trust you on that because I do not know these things firsthand.
I'll send you a link to the Black Lives. We'll make available the link.
I've got their website up here.
Okay, all right.
But go ahead. Just...
Okay. And that has to be part of the conversation. Now we get to the actual meat of this first segment. Yesterday, Democrats passed it was a piece of legislation in the House Democrats, having to do with something about policing. I'm having a senior moment. I can't remember exactly, but before they went in to pass it, they outside the chamber they took a knee, and like the old Colin Kaepernick thing from the middle of the last decade, which, as a libertarian, it'd be interesting to hear your view. Mine is that there are all kinds of ways to bring attention to or protest police misbehavior and the need for major reform of the law enforcement field in this country. But to take a knee when everybody else in a stadium full of people, we're going back to Colin Kaepernick getting this thing going, is putting their hand over their heart and singing the national anthem, indicates that you think there's something fundamentally flawed on a moral level about this country. And he's got the right to do it. I understand that, and anybody has the right to do it. But it's when you take yesterday I posted what you've got up there, and my little caption for that picture was, "I think I'm going to hurl," and I ignited a firestorm. And people,
one question I have.
There wasn't even a flag around, and the national anthem wasn't being played, but they were kneeling, and everybody knows how fraught with significance that particular physical gesture is.
I totally disagree.
Okay, all right.
I 1000% disagree.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the like the OK symbol that they did, and they said that's a white power symbol now. So anytime you catch a right winger doing this, it means they're a racist.
Yeah.
Even if they're doing the circle game, like the break the circle game.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you make that symbol, that's now associated with white supremacy. Because maybe somebody once did that, but they're kneeling here. They're just, to me, they're just kneeling, and I don't want to turn the act of kneeling into to immediate association with dishonoring of veterans and American service and the American machine or whatever. Just what if you go to church and you start kneeling and somebody says, "Oh, well, you're disrespecting the flag." Well, it's like, this is not a flag time. The Democrats on the floor here, they're certainly grandstanding and they're annoying as hell, but they're not. It's not disrespectful.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay. But yes, now we are on common ground. I have just really gotten to where when Floyd was murdered, in the first few days of outrage, I completely understand. I mean, it opened a wound that was not by no means all the way healed, and you can understand the outrage and so forth. At this point, I think there's a whole lot of preening and grandstanding going on in the name of being outraged and deeply concerned and all this kind of thing. And also there's the fact that it was all the Democrats, and they know darn well what they were doing there. We're the party that cares, and because Democrats are always caring about something. That's this self-congratulation, this what we call virtue signaling. That's exactly what was going on. And now we get to the part about the Kente.
Oh, I know. Yes.
Yeah.
I knew the second I saw this article, when you posted this article, the second I saw the headline, I was like, oh my God, they're going to get their asses burned for cultural appropriation, and I can't wait.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the people doing the burning their asses are doing so in a way that, it's cultural appropriation and with kind of a tone of, oh, please,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And understandably, there's a Ghanaian woman. Do we want to do that one right now? Obian Nuju Ikiocha. And I'm not sure where she lives at this point and what she does for a living or anything like that, but she makes a very cogent case for
let's hear what she has to say here.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi friends, I'm usually either too busy or too lazy to make this kind of quick video response. But today something happened and I thought it's actually important enough that I get in front of my camera and make a short video to explain something short enough for me to post on Twitter. I was just looking online today, like most of you, and what did I see? A bunch of Democrat politicians kneeling down, of which I have nothing to say about that because I am not an American. However, they were all having around their necks this colorful fabric, which I'm sure they put around their necks as some kind of mark or show of unity or solidarity with Black people. So in other words, they are putting forward the kente material or this colorful fabric they had around their necks as some kind of placating sign or symbol to show that they are not racist and they are together with Black people. Excuse me, dear Democrats, in your tokenism, you didn't wait to find out that this thing that you're hanging around your neck is not just some African uniform. It's actually the kente material. The kente belongs to the Ghanaian people, mainly the Ashanti tribe. Excuse me, Democrats, don't treat Africans like we're children. These fabrics and these, colorful things that we have within our culture and tradition, they all mean something to us. I know you look at us and you say, oh, Africans, you're so cute in all your colorful dresses. Well, some of those dresses and patterns and colors and fabrics actually do mean something to us. Some of them belong to ancient tribes and mean something to them. So why are you using it as your own show of non-racism or your own show of virtue? Why are you using the kente material to signal your virtue? Stop it. We are not children. Africans are not children. And leave our tradition and our culture to us. And if you don't know much about it, ask somebody. I'm sure there would have been something else you could have done to show your solidarity with black people. Instead of taking the kente material and making a...
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that this epidemic of the modern left treating black people like children is disgusting.
Yeah, and that's a major point of people like Larry Elder. You leftists assume that we all march in lockstep, that we think alike on everything. We're human beings, and we come in as much of a wide a variety as any other race or ethnic group.
I have some Larry Elder clips. I was going to play them later.
Well, just real quickly though, she's not the only one. A bunch of people chimed in. The editor-at-large of the Daily Beast, Ida B. Wells, says, "I admit that I did not have congressional delegations draped." And she is black, by the way. She says, "I admit that I did not have congressional delegations draped in kente cloth on my bingo card." And
it's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, Karen Atia, a Washington Post editor, says, "I really need the guidance of my Ghanaian ancestors after seeing Nancy Pelosi and Kente." Best-selling author Roxane Gay tweeted, "I'm not sure what's funnier, those ridiculous-looking politicians wearing Kente cloth or Courtney Booker smartly opting out of that absurd performance." So
yep.
This thing, got some feedback, some backlash.
And you talk about like just digging yourself deeper in the hole. I mean, the Democrat Party is already losing black support. I mean, if they want to start a purge and they want to just fuel like Candace Owens' Blexit movement, you know, the black exit from the Democrat Party, if they want to fuel that fire until it's an inferno, then this is exactly the type of behavior they need to keep up.
Yeah. Now, is this when you want to share your Larry Elder?
Well, why don't we go ahead and go to the they really said that portion.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to Elder once we start talking about riots.
Okay. All right. Longtime viewers, listeners to the BNC show know that a segment we do quite a bit is They Really Said That. And this time we looked at some things that are being expressed on Twitter. You want to start with Andrew Yang? Yeah,
let's start with the Yang gang here. I find this hysterical on a couple levels. Let's see. I'll share my screen here. Okay, so Andrew Yang says, "If I want to change the culture of police department, particularly if it were going through training or reorganization, I might rename them to Guardians, literally a protector or defender, and adopt a different color scheme. Minneapolis Guardians has a nice ring to it." And man, people very, very appropriately excoriated this poor guy. I say poor guy, but I don't feel any sympathy for him whatsoever. People are saying like replies like, "It's not a sports team. It's not a sports ball team." Another user says, "A good old name change is precisely the kind of transformative thinking we can expect from self-described progressive technocrats. After all, it helped folks forget about that Blackwater's war crimes when it rebranded as XE." And there's tons of these, like it's a soccer team, it's a baseball team. So absolutely change the name, new colors, throw a pep rally, have a spirit week. Thank you all for your always pertinent ideas. You've proven us all wrong regarding your utter ineptitude with this one. So people just gave him a ton of blowback. And one thing that he even said, he replied after there was a ton of negative feedback from it. There was a reply where he had said, "If someone is dressed the same, looks the same, called the same thing, has the same equipment, and works for the same people, patterns of behavior are unlikely to shift." And I think he's sort of negating his own point that if something substantive doesn't change, then nothing's going to change. But if they rebrand it, they rebrand the name of the organization, and they put on some fancy new outfits that that's going to be the catalyst for the change, and I think that's pretty silly.
Yeah.
And what's even funnier is that if you there's not without precedent for this, because there was a town in New Jersey that did this, and they did rebrand their police force to the Guardians. I think it was Camden, New Jersey.
Okay.
But let me pull up this image for you here. I don't know if you watched The Handmaid's Tale at all.
I know about it, but no, I've never subjected myself to an
Okay, so
episode or
in the Handmaid's Tale, it's a dystopian sort of it's a dystopian tale, right? Where this basically this right-wing religious sect takes over the United States, and it puts all the women into these long robes and nun hats and stuff like that, and everything's very, very conservative. It's basically like, you know, what I imagine that all the left thinks is the Fox News vision of the world. But the Guardian is this like authoritarian police officer, and there's just, you know, like the Soviet guards that walk around with heavy machine guns guarding the perimeter of Czechoslovakia. Like there's, you know, these guys in all the streets and all the corners. They're peeping behind every corner, making sure that you don't get out of line. They're heavily armed, and that's the image that most people think of these days when you hear the word Guardian. It kind of falls flat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It pretty much sounds like an empty gesture from what I'm able to gather.
Yeah.
And Andrew Yang has shown that he's a sharp and can be a sharp individual. I'm kind of disappointed that he slipped in silliness here.
I'm not calling him a dummy, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the hat that just says math on it, and that was going to lead him to the presidency. I mean, you can kind of say that smart people do dumb things, right?
Yeah.
And Andrew Yang thinking he would be president was kind of one of those dumb things.
Yeah.
You want to talk about S.E. Cupp?
Yeah. Now, S.E. Cupp's kind of an interesting individual. She is in that small group of people, for one thing, that she's a conservative atheist. And that's very interesting too. She went to a Catholic girls' school when she was growing up. She's got a degree in art history, and she's a classically trained ballerina.
Mm.
And then she got into being an opinion columnist, and she writes for the New York Daily News, and she's also on CNN a lot.
Mm.
And she wrote a book some years ago called Losing Our Religion, in which she says, I myself can't bring myself to believe in God, but institutionally, I think the Judeo-Christian tradition is such a foundational part of our society and culture and heritage that if we abandon it, it's not going to be good for society. It will cause society to fray around the edges, and it's in kind of an interesting angle. She wants to see Christianity and the Judeo-Christian tradition flourish, not because she believes in God, but
Mm-hmm.
but and the book was called Losing Our Religion. It's kind of an interesting angle. But she's she likes to market herself as being a surprising conservative, and that I have views that are probably considered unorthodox for a conservative. I remember after the Supreme Court Obergefell versus Hodges decision, she cried tears of joy on television about blacks are finally going to, or gays are finally going to get to marry and all this. Anyway, that's who S.E. Cupp is. And so I like S.E. Cupp in a lot of ways. She and I we're pretty much aligned on our views of Donald Trump, that the man's just plain not well. But
Mm-hmm.
she, the other day, she tweeted, pick a knee, the one that knelt on a neck or the one that knelt to try to prevent it. And that's just, it's pure posturing.
It's a childish standpoint to think that one could not disagree with Colin Kaepernick and also disagree with the senseless murder of a man in custody of the police.
Yeah.
That is the most childish opinion I think I've ever heard in my life. And my favorite reply to this is like the second one down. You see her on the screen. It says, "Editor's note: George Floyd was murdered in a deep blue city ruled by Democrats for 40 plus years, in a deep blue state ruled by Democrats for 40 plus years. It was a Democrat knee that murdered George Floyd."
Yeah, very good point. So that's Ceci Cup there. Who's next? The VSG, the very stable genius, our president, such as he is. One of the things that Donald Trump does, one of his most egregious traits, is peddle conspiracy theories. You know, he was a birther during the Obama era, and I want to see his birth certificate and all that stuff. You know, I think he was born in Africa and blah blah blah. And then a little later, he during the spring of 2016, as it came down to where he and Ted Cruz were the last two Republican candidates, he was peddling this theory that that somehow Ted Cruz's father, there apparently is some obscure photograph taken in Texas in 1963 of Ted Cruz's father being in the same photograph as Lee Harvey Oswald or something. And he said, could be some connection there. He always does it, frames it that way. Worth looking into, isn't it? And then more recently, he's this whole business of trying to heavily insinuate that Joe Scarborough of the MSNBC show Morning Joe possibly murdered his aide in an district office in Florida when Scarborough was a House member, a Republican congressman. And then this one, though, is perhaps the worst of all.
Is this the one with the older gentleman that gets pushed by the police?
We all know about the fellow in Buffalo, a peace activist who was very much in the forefront of a demonstration the other day in Buffalo, and police pushed him to the ground, and he fell and hit his head very hard and fractured his skull. It was bleeding on the pavement, and there's video of that, and that's being investigated and so forth. But Trump says Buffalo protester shoved by police could be an Antifa provocateur. 75-year-old Martin Gugino was pushed away after appearing to scan police communications in order to black out the equipment. OANN. That's kind of like Fox News on steroids. It's a heavily Trumpist small television news channel, which Trump's become very fond of. OANN, I watched. He fell harder than was pushed. Was aiming scanner. Could be a setup. That's really low stuff. That's just
pretty low.
Really, yep.
But I will say, though, that I think everyone saw that video, right?
Yeah.
And the outrage against the police is just a new thing that's in vogue, I guess. And we libertarians have been ringing that bell for a long time.
Yeah.
But I will say that this was a white guy. That's not supposed to happen. Right? I mean, the narrative is that they're targeting blacks, and this guy, an old frail white guy, gets pushed to the ground and hurt pretty badly. It appears, but he's a white guy.
Yeah,
that's counter narrative.
Well, he like I say, he's a peace activist, and so he's got some left wing cred. I don't know. But
yeah,
okay.
I get it. I'm just saying that, like, in the culture that is today, the tenor of the society is that the police are out there abusing blacks, and it really looks like a number of police are abusing everyone.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Law enforcement the law enforcement field needs to undergo some serious self-examination and reform. And so, yeah. But okay,
We'll talk
so
about that a little bit later too.
Yeah, because we're getting to that. But another thing he does, along with peddling conspiracy theories, another one of his signature ways of expressing himself or himself on Twitter is to whine. If I wasn't constantly harassed for 3 years by fake and illegal investigations, Russia, and the impeachment hoax, I'd be up by 25 points on Sleepy Joe and the do-nothing Democrats. Very unfair, but it is what it is. Well, that's kind of like saying, if the sky were chartreuse instead of blue, I might be the world's most successful pundit or something, if I weren't harassed, I'd be up 25 points on Sleepy Joe. We don't know that. There's all kinds of factors involved in that.
He probably is that much up on him. I mean, the last time around he was getting pummeled in the polls.
Yeah.
And then he swept the electorate.
Yeah. We shall see, but I mean, it's just the whining. The fake news media and the Democrats have done nothing but pick on me, and that's why I, aren't more of a winner than I am. I'm just anyway.
I think he's made his own bed to a large degree, but at the same time, I think the Democrats do pick on him, and I don't think that they're singling him out. They're going to pick on whoever the opposing party is that's in power, but he's just, man, he's an easy target because of obvious reasons.
Several polls showing behind, and you read these stories about his campaign. His campaign team met somewhere in Alexandria, Virginia, a couple of days ago, and the big theme of their meeting was, what is our message? Well, if in June of an election year, and you're the campaign team of the incumbent president, you got to be asking, what is our message? There's no one who's a grown-up of sound mind that thinks that corrupt, sleepy, fingering Joe Biden would guide this nation any better than Donald Trump. I'm sorry. No. Like Trump is a disaster, but guess what? Joe Biden's going to be a disaster too. He's going to be an enormous disaster. And what's worse than that is he may not be cognitive aware enough a few years in to even know what's going on, and he could be led by the nose by anybody. And it's sad. It's sad to watch them abuse him this way. And you bet. Excellent. Well stated. Shall we go to the next tweet?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Gushers. What the heck is Gushers?
Like the candy?
Right. It's a candy, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah, it's like it's like a fruit thing. You put it in your mouth and it squirts.
Well, the company that makes it. Okay. Yeah, it's a squirty kind of thing.
Maybe that's why the Democrats were all on their knees. Hey.
The corporation that makes Gushers put out a tweet saying, Gushers wouldn't be Gushers without the Black community and your voices. We're working with Fruit by the Foot on creating space to amplify that. We see you. We stand with you. And we all have a long way to go in this fight against racism for systemic change. Ben Shapiro, I loved his take on it. He retweeted that and then put with a comment of his own. Thank God. I was so concerned that Gushers and Fruit by the Foot were secretly supportive of white supremacy. Glad they made that clear for us all,
Yeah, isn't it? Aren't we glad that we got the clarity from Amazon and every other company about where they stand on not murdering Black people? Like,
don't mistake us for a bigot,
I get it, but I also find it a little, I don't know, a little shallow. It's like it's hard to not say you're just trying to peddle some gum, and maybe you're sincere. I have no doubt that a lot of companies that promote social justice issues are sincere, but I'm not sure it's well received. I'm not sure that the people looking around their neighborhood and watching the fires slowly go, I just don't see those people wondering what Gushers and Fruit by the Foot and Amazon, feel about it.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing about it? Are you going to donate some money to rebuilding this place? Are you going to donate some money to get some people out of jail who don't deserve to be? Are you going to donate some resources to give people food and water who have been displaced? Like, what are you going to actually do?
Yeah. Grandstanding. Preening.
Yeah.
Once again. Yeah.
Yeah, if you just say it, I mean, you're just grandstanding.
Yeah. Now there's the crying girl. And the more I watch this thing, I gotta wonder. I think we need to leave the door open to the possibility that this is a
satire.
Spoof. Yeah.
Yeah. I watched it a couple of times.
Over the top.
I'm thinking that it's satire, but if it is, this woman needs an Oscar for this performance.
Yeah.
If it's satire, because she
either needs an Oscar or therapy.
No, I'm not exactly the voice that people need to be hearing right now. In fact, I need more confirmation that this is real. I've gotten some, but I need more confirmation that this is real. Trump supporters got an email that said that this email is for patriots only. You've been identified as one of President Trump's fiercest and most loyal defenders, and according to your donor file, you'd make an excellent addition to the Trump army. It goes on to tell them that they would get a limited edition camo Keep America Great hat, to let them know that you are the president's first line of defense when it comes to fighting off the liberal mob. I don't know if you know, Hitler made Jews wear yellow stars. This feels like the reverse of that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm convinced this is satire now. Like, I just can't. I can't believe there's someone that this retarded.
Yeah, I'm beginning to take that view myself. But it was a cute addition to Twitter. By the way, Sarah Cooper, a comedian who does these short videos on Twitter where she puts her own gestures and facial expressions to Trump, literally his voice, clips from press conferences and stuff. You ever seen any of those? I'll send you some. They're funny. Okay, well, is it about time to go to the next segment?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, if we want to make sure we leave room for this. This is the state and the individual in a time of civil unrest. Would dismantling the police force in Minneapolis be a good thing for minorities? Take it, Clyde.
So let me share this clip here, and we'll go from there.
But to be clear, you're not talking about reform. The word dismantle is intentionally different than reform. This is more than reform. This is dismantling. I mean, activists who support this are calling this a police-free future.
Yeah, and a lot of us were asked if we could imagine a future without police back in 2017 when we were running for office. And I answered yes to that question. To me, that future is a long way away, and it would take an enormous amount of investment in things that we know work to keep people safe. I mean, for a lot of folks in our community, stable housing is a safety issue. Having access to healthcare is a safety issue. And so having, I think one thing folks are asking is to stop investing so much money in this militarized police force and instead invest in the things that our community really needs. So, I know the statement was bold, and I stand by that bold statement, but the work ahead of us will be long. It will include every member of our community. It has to. And, I think we have very immediate things. We have a state action against our police department, which gives us legal mechanisms in the very short term. There's lessons from all over the country, all over the world that we're looking to take immediate steps while we work toward building the systems that we would need to imagine that future.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police-free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done. And so in the very immediate, we have to lean into whatever changes we can make in our existing police department. You know, I think we look to cities like Camden, New Jersey, that completely restructured their department as we build up systems. And we've already done that. We are not starting from scratch. We have invested in community-based safety strategies. We have knowledge in our community across the city. We've done an analysis of all the reasons people call 911 and have looked at ways we can shift the response away from armed police officers into a more appropriate response for mental health calls, for some domestic violence calls, for health-related issues. And so the groundwork is laid already in Minneapolis for us to build on that, to learn from folks around the world, but really also to listen to our community and put those community voices front and center as we build up those systems.
Okay, two things I want to say here.
Okay.
One, she's talking about, okay, if you call the police and you're not a privileged person, and I'm assuming she means a white person, if you're not a person of privilege and the police get there, she's insinuating that things get worse. Okay, maybe that's true. I'm not saying it's not. There's been we've on this show talked about a lot of police misconduct, people getting shot through windows, the police knocking on the wrong door, coming in, blowing the places apart, people police serving warrants without knocking on the door, and meeting armed residents who think their home's being broken into and killing the residents. We've talked about that kind of stuff. We understand that the police are doing wrong sometimes, and that those situations are not okay. All right, so she says that, but she's insinuating that when the police arrive, that they make things worse. But we talked about Larry Elder, black conservative attorney, and he has a radio show. I wish I had a data point to back this up, but he was saying that black people are 7 times more likely to call the police. So the people who are initiating the requests for help from the police most of the time are black people. And now this white councilwoman is going to say, okay, because there have been some incidents, we haven't counted them, we're apparently not doing the math, but because there have been some incidents where police have mistreated and even killed people. I mean, again, this is not okay, and this must end. And there was no one who didn't think so. I've never seen the left and right so united on something besides the death of George Floyd, other than invading Iraq. They were together on it. That was wrong. But she's saying that, okay, because this incident happened, all of you who are calling the police for help and getting it, what are you going to do now? Well, we don't want to make it worse, so we're not going to send any cops. I think that is just, the black community should be outraged about that. Then she tells another lie. She says that they completely restructured Camden, New Jersey, but they didn't do that. What they did was they basically went through a rehiring process for their current police officers. So when they did their restructuring, okay, they took all of their current police officers and rehired them if they passed a 50-page application. They retook psychological testing. So I take that to mean that they had already taken it when they had been hired the first time. So the previous police force. So they take this psychological retest, and then they go through an interview process. So that's pretty much it, aside from a rebranding, different color uniforms, and now they call them guardians, like Andrew Yang wanted. So proving Andrew Yang is just a copycat, piece of repeating crap. But they didn't completely restructure the police force. They made some good changes. They re-interviewed people. They made sure that the people that they had on staff were on the level. They gave them some psychiatric training, and I'm not vouching for what that was. I don't know the specifics of it. But they didn't completely reboot the police force. On the other side of this thing, the police force was, the majority of the police force were the same people working in the same department with a rebrand. So this is a lie. Okay. Sorry to go on a soapbox there.
No, I think it was a very important thing to do. How are we looking at time?
We're good. Well, since we only have 3 segments, we're good on time. So we're going to keep going down some statistics, I think, and we're going to talk about. We're just going to round out talking about defunding the police and talking about the riots and how people are helping or not helping. If that works for you.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I do want to talk some Larry Elder clips, if that's okay.
Sure.
Again, Larry Elder is an African-American attorney. He has a radio show. He is a conservative, but I think that it should be something that's interesting for lefty types because the conservative movement amongst blacks is growing, and people have to hear some type of reason. And I think as a white person, I have to, and you have to, we have to approach this very delicately, because there's the concept of the lived experience. You have data, and then you have the lived experience, and you can easily say something that's incorrect because you assume something about the lived experience of other people. So I don't think it's my time to talk. So I'm gonna let black people talk, and this is Larry Elder on some statistics here. So,
how can these people out there in the streets not know, according to the CDC, that police killings of blacks have dramatically declined over the last 45 years by almost 75%? How can you not know that? How can you not know of a peer-reviewed study in a publication put out by the National Association of Sciences in which every single police shooting in the year 2015 was examined, and they could not find any evidence whatsoever of disproportionate deadly force used against blacks? And then, of course, there's a smaller study by the Harvard economist I told you about. Not only did he not find that they used disproportionate deadly force against blacks, but that they were more hesitant, more reluctant to use deadly force against blacks than against whites. How can you not know this? How can you not know about the police contact survey that's done every 2 years or 3 years, where over 60,000 Americans are asked, did you have any contact with the police last year? If the answer is yes, then a series of questions regarding how you were treated are asked. No pattern whatsoever of disproportionate force used against minorities. Now, the perception is that the average black person is going to have far more interactions with the cops than the average white person. It turns out that in terms of people that have 2 or more contacts with the police any given year, you're talking about 1.2% of all whites, 1.5% of all blacks. So it is rare for people to have multiple contacts with the police. How can you not know this? How can you not know that more whites are murdered by blacks than blacks are murdered by whites? How can you not know that? Now, again, as I said many times, most murder is same-race murder. But to the extent that there are interracial black-white homicides every year, about 750, how can you not know that blacks kill 500 whites, even though blacks are 13% of the population, and whites kill 250 blacks, even though they're around 61% of the population? How can you not know that? How can you not know that a young black boy is around 8 times more likely to be a homicide victim compared to a young white boy? How can you not know that? You're out in the streets making all these assertions, and what you're doing is making things worse. You're creating an image of the police department that's going to make people not want to join it, and you're causing the so-called Ferguson effect that Rahm Emanuel talked about, where he said the police in Chicago have rolled themselves up into a fetal position for fear of being accused of being racist.
Heather McDonald of the Manhattan Institute makes a similar point and backs it up with very exhaustively culled statistical data.
I read her article, but given that she's not a person of color, I decided not to include it.
Exactly.
But she does give very black and white facts, and some of those facts were things like there's no statistical difference found between the percentage of Hispanics, 86%, blacks, 85%, and whites, 83%, who reported a crime or neighborhood disturbance and felt the police were helpful. And that's from a Department of Justice report from 2013, so it's a little bit older, but probably still pretty relevant. But then again, you can make data say whatever you want it to say. I don't know who they surveyed or what the neighborhoods were like where they surveyed them or what cities that came from. Even Larry Elder said that survey goes out to 60,000 people in a country of 330 million. So you talk about lived experiences. There are a whole lot of different lived experiences in what, the 200 and whatever million people that are left over.
Yeah.
I think I did some bad math just now. Forgive me.
I'll kind of come full circle and say what I said at the beginning of today's show, that there is no doubt that that race is still a big deal in American society. We have so many of us, black, white, and whatever, since over the last 55, 60 years, that surely we're about to get to the point where Dr. King's formulation of judging people by the content of their character is the truth, and that being cognizant of someone's race is way down the list of whatever you're cognizant of when you're interacting with them, but we're clearly not there, and there's the reasons for that are myriad, but we can't ignore any of them.
While we're talking about,
there's a few of them, and we're going to talk about those to the exclusion of the others. So you can't do that.
While we're talking about Larry Elder, there's a great video on YouTube. I was going to cue it up for a clip here. I'm not going to play it because in the interest of time, but there's a great clip of him on the Dave Rubin show, on the Rubin Report. Dave Rubin used to be a leftist commentator with the Young Turks, had a political awakening and sort of went to the right, and is now a political libertarianish commentator. Had Larry Elder on his show, said basically the same thing: racism is still a big problem in America, and Larry was basically like, what's your data for that? Like, how do you get to that conclusion? And he basically gives Rubin his final political awakening right then and there. And I'm not speaking for the validity of his claims. I'm just saying that that's what Larry Elder said. I'll put a link in the show notes and maybe a clip at the end of the show for people to listen to that. But we talk about people making things worse, right? Trying to make things better, but just making things worse. I think the biggest tragedy of this whole thing, we talked about earlier, how the left and the right, you didn't hear anybody saying they saw the video of George Floyd's death and thinking that it was justified or that there was anything okay about it. I heard every conservative I knew, every Republican I knew, every lefty that I know, I heard them all saying the same thing. That is messed up. That should not happen. And guess what? They took a long time to arrest the guy, but they arrested the guy. And then they arrested the other 4. And people went to the streets and burned shit down. And I think that that's a really sad missed opportunity, because we had the left and the right united on this issue, and they blew it by breaking out the store windows and crap. And in a lot of cases, that wasn't black people doing that. And you had black people on the streets going, we're going to get blamed for this, goddammit. Don't do this. So if you got here's another clip, if you don't mind me playing a couple clips.
No, that's fine.
Here's one. I only have the audio, but the woman is talking to a protester, and really we're talking about a rioter here. I think there's a big difference between a protester and a rioter. Yeah. But this woman, this black woman, is talking to this person who's filming, and you don't get to see the race of the person she's talking to, but I get the impression this is a white person.
Okay.
Problem that bothers me You said Black Lives Matter. I worked here part-time. Plus, I'm a part owner of this store. You said Black Lives Matter. Why don't you choke me? I'm black.
Tell him, sister.
Look what you did to my store.
Tell him, sister.
Look what you did to my store.
Tell him, sister. That's right, because I got they back. These are my dudes right here. Good
Look
men.
at the things you done.
Good men.
Look.
The Black Lives Matter.
We've been here all night cleaning up. All night cleaning.
And you got black people standing right here with them. Black
Tell
people.
me
That's right.
Black Lives Matter.
Exactly.
You lied. You wanted to loot the store. You needed money. Get a job like I do. Stop stealing. This is the neighborhood. We're trying to build it up, and you tearing it down.
I think that's pretty powerful stuff.
And I'm greatly heartened to see GoFundMe campaigns get going for a lot of these business owners who had their establishments just completely destroyed.
Yeah. I really honestly think it's an excuse to just tear crap up. I mean, you had there's
Get
another
yourself
one.
some free electronics,
Yeah, or whatever's close at hand. You know, there was a great image I saw, a meme on Facebook, and there was like this a bunch of people like beating up this self checkout station at a Target, and this kid is like not kid, but like a early 20s or late teens type of dorky kid, has like a big box of Lego sets under his arm, and he's sneaking out of the Target while all the carnage is going on. It's just hysterical. Okay, here's one more of people helping, thinking that they're helping anyway. This is a black woman, young black woman, shouting at people who are looting and burning things and breaking windows, and you can see the flames in the scene, and she's just yelling at a bunch of white kids. Yeah, so she talks a lot about how, you know, you're burning down the wrong place.
This anger and this rage, because there's a way to get answers.
Let me skip ahead here a little bit.
Rely on that as a charging station. And what? Will it even work now? For the sake of what? So you can go back home to your comforts. Sit in your house and think that you did work today. There are people out here who work in these bodegas, who are security officers, who are maybe not descendants of slavery, but came over here as immigrants to do their jobs. So great, everybody.
Yeah, so she's yelling at these white kids like, you think you're helping? You just burnt down my neighborhood. There's a methadone clinic over there that people rely on for help. It's on fire, you know? Like, and now you all get to go back up to your neighborhoods. You get into your cars and you can drive home to your neighborhoods and sleep in your comfy bed, thinking that you did the black community a great service with your you know, being an ally by coming into a black neighborhood and bashing out the windows of people's businesses. And even if it is a corporate chain, that's where people work. That's where they get their livelihood from. That's how they feed their families.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I hate to play this card, but there's going to be a lot of people who say a lot of that stuff that happened, that's not the fault of black people. And they're right. You know, there's going to be a lot of stuff committed by white people and other other demographics that are going to get foisted on black people. They're going to, and it's going to set this whole thing back. We're talking about racial issues that I can't believe we even have to talk about.
Hey, buddy, I remember the Watts riots of 1965 and the Detroit riots of 67. I saw that stuff live on television.
Yeah, can you believe we're back here again? You know what I mean? Like, it's and if you're an ally and you think you're helping, like, I don't know, it just seems like from a clip like that, you got to re-examine what your method of helping is.
Yeah.
It sure isn't bashing the screen out of a window out of a business.
As we said at the outset, things are very raw in America right now, but let's proceed with the utmost sense of responsibility as we try to find our way forward from this, you know, and part of it means not glossing over anything, any aspect of this. You got to have all facts before us.
Yeah, man, it's so nuanced. Like, this is not, I hate to use a pun like this, but this is not a black and white issue. This is a very, very nuanced issue, and nobody knows the depth of it. I mean, this is I hate to say unprecedented, but it's something that nobody has a full handle on, and we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we better wrap it up.
Okay. There perhaps wasn't quite as much levity to today's episode as usually characterizes the BNC show, but I think we covered a lot of important ground. And thanks for listening / viewing, everybody. Please chime in on the comment threads of our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. Send us emails. We'd like to build a community and have conversations with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would love to play your video and audio clips on the show. So if you have a comment about something we talked about, if you have an idea for something we should talk about, if you got something you just want to get off your mind, I would love to have your video and audio clips. Send those to barneyandclydeshow@gmail.com, or you can send those in direct message on Facebook, facebook.com/barneyandclydeshow, or just get a hold of us directly and ask us where you can send that stuff to, and I'll make sure you find it.
You bet. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, stay vigilant about your freedom.
Well, that's an interesting development.